All right, so let's dive into string methods. As I mentioned in video 1, strings in Python are called objects. Now, objects mean that they have data and methods. And if you are a computer scientist or you're interested in programming and you really enjoy this course, I would ask you to consider taking object-oriented programming, which is Cyber 150, I believe. And in object-oriented programming, you'll learn all about objects and sort of how objects work. But something about objects, some of the essential characteristics of objects are that they have data and they also have methods. Okay, so the data is usually hidden, and the way you access it is through methods. Okay, so strings in Python are objects, so they obviously have many types of methods. Okay, so these methods are divided into different types of operations, and we generally use the dot notation as we've used so far in this course. We just use the dot notation over and over and over again. Okay, so if I have first name, so the general format here is myString.method arguments, right? So I could have first name is the name of the string, dot whatever method, dot whatever arguments that method requires. Okay, so some methods can test a string for characteristics like alphanumeric, or some can also like and those ones generally, so if I want to test it for alphanumeric or numeric, it's going to return a true or false, right? So if some string is alphanumeric, then true or false, right? So you can do that, but you can also test for certain, or you can actually do things to your string as well. So like upper and lower actually manipulate your string. Okay, so some of them that are just tests. We have some really, really interesting tests here, especially if you're doing user input manipulation and validation. It's really, really important. So let's say you're taking passwords, for instance. You can actually test alphanumeric, alpha, digit, lower, space, upper, so on and so forth. So obviously is alnum means returns true if it contains only alphabetic letters or digits. Okay, so that means if you have an exclamation point or an ampersand or something like that, it's going to return a false because it's only looking for those ASCII values that represent numbers and letters. Okay, so is alpha returns true if it's only alphabetic letters, no numbers. If there's a number in there or there's a character or a symbol or something, it's going to return false. Now is digit, it's going to check for if it's just numbers. So it's going to return true if it's only numeric digits. Is lower, it's going to return true if it's all lowercase. Is space returns true if the string contains only white space characters and has at least one space. So essentially, if you can check to see if the string is empty. Okay, so let's imagine you are taking a bunch of user input, again, from Twitter data. And you're pulling that data in, and you have a bunch of these random, like, empty tweets, and someone used a lot of spaces. And maybe you've parsed it out, and you've tokenized it, and you've done all this kind of stuff, which we'll cover in a little bit in this chapter. You can actually check to see if a string is space and not even parse it and not even analyze it, because if it's all spaces, it doesn't really matter, right? And then obviously if you have is lower, you also have is upper. So returns true if alphabetic letters in the string are uppercase, okay? So again, moving on with the string methods, some methods return a copy of the string to which modifications have been made. Now we remember that strings are immutable, right? So if we're going to do any modification to a string, it has to return a copy of the string. Okay, so that makes sense, right? Some methods are going to return a copy of the string. It's not going to modify the string and return the string. It's going to return a copy of it, okay? So it simulates strings as mutable objects, essentially pulls it in, makes the changes, creates a new string, returns that new string, okay? So, and again, when we think about string comparisons, they have to be case sensitive, right? They are case sensitive, and they have to be because the way strings are compared is by ASCII value. Right. So if the two ASCII values are not the same, which if we look at an ASCII chart, capital A and lower A are two totally different numbers. And I have an ASCII chart here. So capital A is decimal 65, lowercase a is decimal 97. Okay, so 65 never equals 97. Okay, so string comparisons must be case sensitive. So uppercase characters are always distinguished. So lower and upper methods can be used for making comparisons. So if I want to compare user input and someone enters their name as ADAM with a lowercase a and someone else enters it with a uppercase a, and I want to see whether those are the same, we can actually use lower and upper, this lower or upper function, to first convert user input to lowercase and then compare it to something that we want to compare it to. Okay, and I will kind of show you how to do that as well. So essentially, these string methods that return a copy of manipulated text, we have lower, which returns a copy of the string with all lowercase. We have lstrip, which returns a copy of the string with all leading white space characters removed. Okay, so a lot of times when you're doing data analytics, you want to strip off leading white space, and you want to strip off trailing white space, right? So left white space, right white space. So with lstrip, you're going to return all the leading white space characters removed. Okay, so leading white space are spaces, new lines, and tabs, and blah, 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 blah. So we want to move in until we actually have valuable and useful information. We also have lstrip char, which it's a string containing a character, right? So you can return a copy of the string with these instances of the char that appear at the beginning of the string removed. Okay, we have strip, where you can use char, and that's going to pull that character out. We have lstrip, which means we're going to strip all of these characters off of the left side. Okay, all of them off of the left side. Okay, and then of course we have rstrip, which is the same as lstrip but on the right. We have rstrip with a character, which is the same as lstrip with a character but on the right at the end. And then we have strip. So the strip function is really, really cool because it returns a copy of the string with all leading and trailing white space characters removed. So it just pulls the string in without any white space. You also have with a character or something, so it returns a copy of the string with all instances of char, whatever that is, because it'd actually be a string that appear at the beginning and end of the string removed. Okay, so if you're parsing data, let's say it's HTML data, and you're parsing through divs, okay, you can actually find div and you can strip that off of there on the lstrip. You could also find div and strip it off the rstrip, but in HTML you actually have a slash before the div, okay? So lstrip would be useful in that instance. Now if it's something where you have like an XML or something like that in front and behind, you can actually just strip the XML off. Okay, so that's sort of what the strip does. It just simply strips either left white space, right white space, or all white space, or some sort of a predefined character. Okay, and then you also have upper. Now you're going to use lower and upper a lot. So essentially upper returns a copy of the string with all alphanumeric letters converted to uppercase. Okay, so again, programs, when we're doing these string things, programs oftentimes need to look for substrings. So there are some cool methods with these. So if you want to find out whether something ends with a substring or starts with a substring, you can use ends with or starts with. So again, true or false is sort of the thing that you find there. You also have this find, so you can actually search for a substring within the string. Now you can use if substring in string, or you can do string dot find substring. Okay, so it's two different ways to do the same thing. Okay. You also have replace, which is really, 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 really useful. So when you're parsing out data, a lot of times you'll pull data off the web, for instance, and it'll have all kinds of junky characters in it. You can actually just go find all the commas and replace those with nothing. You can go find spaces and replace those with underscore. You can go find, so you can do all kinds of cool stuff. And that's essentially find this substring and replace it with this certain thing. Okay, so it's going to return a copy of the string where every occurrence of the substring is replaced with a new string. Okay, and that's this replace is very, 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 very useful in terms of how we actually manipulate strings. Okay, so again, here's ends with, find, replace, and starts with. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a little break. On the other side, we're going to do the next video with just string methods. And then we're rounding it out with the repetition operator and then split, okay? So we're getting real close to the end of the chapter. Hold tight.